This week, a finance minister and deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, isn't merely creating political intrigue. It's also set to change the coming trade battle between Canada, the U.S. and Mexico. For more on this story, we're joined by John Manley, former finance minister, former deputy prime minister, and currently chairman of Jefferies Canada and senior advisor at Bennett Jones. We're also joined by Lisa Raitt, vice chair of global investment banking at CIBC Capital Markets and former deputy leader of the Conservative Party. All right, we've got your illustrious titles and accomplishments out of the way. Thank you both for joining us.
Pleasure.
Lisa, let's start with you. Dominic LeBlanc is the new finance minister. Critics, cynics are saying, well, yes, a very well-respected politician, but also a very good friend of the Trudeau family and Justin Trudeau for years. So another insider that Prime Minister Trudeau is sort of insulating himself with. Is that a fair criticism or no? What do you make of the appointment?
I think Prime Minister ran out of people to turn to, quite frankly. Dominic is now holding a handful of portfolios, a lot of them quite significant, a lot of them which deserves the attention of a single minister. And sometimes you actually had a minister having help from a parliamentary secretary. So the load on him is a lot. It is not insignificant that the Prime Minister chose Dominic to do this. The reason being, I think Dominic is the best communicator that is left in the cabinet. And the sad part is, though, you have to communicate the hand you're dealt. And the economic status of Canada right now and the situation that we're facing vis-a-vis Mr. Trump in the United States, it doesn't matter how great a communicator you are. What's going to matter is how you maneuver. And right now, this government doesn't seem to be able to figure out how to put their next foot in front of each other internally, let alone how to move the country forward.
John, what's your view?
Well, I agree with what Lisa has said. The government is in a state of chaos. Losing a finance minister can be managed at certain times, but this was particularly dramatic given that it was the very day of the fall economic statement and that it was accompanied by that letter that was laced with very serious criticisms of the direction the government was going. So I think this is a government that has been in free fall for a while in the polls and is now in a state of considerable chaos. Evidently, the Prime Minister is going to fill some of the vacancies in cabinet. I certainly agree that Dominic is probably the logical choice, given where we're at in the cycle. But I can't honestly see how the party could present any kind of campaign either with the provinces and other partners as part of Team Canada, or to even run an election campaign when insiders themselves have questioned the Prime Minister's effectiveness as a leader right now.
Well, let's ask you both. Do you have any sense, based on what you know and who you're talking to and your experience, as to the expectations for Prime Minister Trudeau? Will he step down eventually? Could we see an election sooner than later? Perhaps not. What do you think, Lisa?
I'll tell you that I think what the country needs is an election, because I think somebody needs a strong mandate to negotiate with the United States with respect to these 25% tariffs. I think that's an existential threat that we have to take seriously. If we're in the middle of a leadership race during that time, I can tell you I've been in one and I've ran one, and nobody's paying attention to what's happening in Ottawa when there's a leadership race on. It's just all consuming. And we don't have the luxury of being consumed with something internally when something externally is that important. So I think a quick election, figure out who has the mandate and proceed from there. But I doubt that's the direction that this government is going to go in. And I would suspect we'll see a cabinet shuffle and we'll see the Prime Minister try to hang on over the Christmas holidays and take the temperature of his caucus when he returns at the end of January.
Do you concur with that, John? What are your expectations?
Well, my expectations are in line with that. I was actually saying a couple of weeks ago that we needed to have an election, that the way I put it is that we know very few things that we know for sure. One thing we know is that Hurricane Donald is going to make landfall on January 20th. We know that. They're already, the invitation list for the parties in Washington are already out there. So we know when that's going to happen, and we should really If we're going to face a hurricane, we should be getting our outdoor furniture in the house right now. We shouldn't wait till after it. So it would be better if we could settle our own political issues before then. However, Monday changed all of that. And I don't think that the governing party is in a position to have an election anytime soon. My expectation, as Lisa has said, is that the Prime Minister, he's pretty happy to see all the MPs leave Ottawa this week. There's now going to be a bit of a respite. People will go home. They'll think about things other than politics, thank goodness, for a few days, and he can begin to take the temperature of things afterwards. But if I had to place a bet today, I'd say, that he's going to have to find a way to allow a succession to occur. I think that the party would probably want to find a way to do it in a much more rapid fashion than the experiences that both Lisa and I have had with past leadership campaigns. I wouldn't be surprised to see the party executive meet and ask Dominic LeBlanc to take over the role as acting leader and therefore as Prime Minister and lead the party into an election. You heard it here first, just a hunch that I have.
Okay, well, that's what we want. Interesting, very interesting. All right, let's get to trade. So Chrystia Freeland spearheaded the USMCA negotiations in 2018. You've both said that things are chaotic right now. So who would lead in trade negotiations, and also, and maybe it's LeBlanc, for all we know, he of course was at Mar-a-Lago, but also who would lead, who would fill the void, and does this put Team Canada on the back foot straight away?
I think John Manley should lead the negotiations. I'll just put it out there. How about I make that?
I'd only do it if it was jointly led with Lisa Raitt.
There we go. That's a powerhouse team.
Too much. Too much. I think that that's a really good question on it. I'm sure people are trying to ponder. Obviously, Dominic LeBlanc would be the person they pick. But I'd like to know where Mélanie Joly is in all of this, quite frankly. Mélanie Joly is the Minister of Global Affairs. She would have had her portfolio carved out to be given to Chrystia Freeland if that was the plan. And we really haven't heard much from her. And quite frankly, we haven't heard from the Prime Minister. I mean, what CEO would allow this kind of news to twist around for 4 or 5 days without addressing the company or the people around them? I just don't understand his silence and why he hasn't come clean, gone to Parliament, made any pronouncements, given any interviews. It's a bit of a shambles, I have to say. We're really in the dark, and which allows John and I to put ourselves forward to lead the negotiations for the United States.
All right.
I think I wouldn't overlook François-Philippe Champagne in that question. Clearly, the foreign minister has a role. The trade minister, Mary Ng, is very competent, but has had a very low profile. Champagne has been essentially industry minister, although we call him something different today. And he also is a former minister of trade, and he has a lot of international experience. If the Prime Minister were to ask for my advice, I'd say you create a team. The Finance Minister clearly has to be part of that, and that Champagne and Mélanie Joly need to be part of that as well. Probably I'd spearhead it with Champagne. He's very energetic. He knows the files. Trade and industry are very closely related, and he's now apart from LeBlanc, the senior economic minister in the government.
All right, very good. And also wondering, in terms of trade, do you think it's going to be different this time in that the first time around, Trump was a neophyte politician. Trudeau was still fairly popular at the time. This time, Trump seems to feel he has a mandate, maybe not in the House, but he's surrounding himself with loyalists. And then you've got Trudeau losing his grip on power. So again, are we approaching this from inevitably a defensive position?
Yeah, it's a good scene set for sure. I'd add one more thing. Trump only has this term. Last time, he may have been worried about what a second term would look like for him. This time, it's his 4 years and then nothing for him after that. And I don't know whether or not he cares about whether the Republican Party lasts after his 4 years. So he's going to do exactly what he thinks is best. I mean, take a look at the legislation that's been tabled in the United States right now by the leader in the Senate. Elon Musk came out and torpedoed it on social media, and Donald Trump agrees with them. I mean, it is a very chaotic situation, and Donald Trump is in charge. So that's who you're negotiating with. And I don't know if it matters that Mr. Trudeau's on his way out or that there's going to be somebody else there. You just got to manage it and hit it from all angles at any given time and be prepared, like at 3 a.m. when Donald Trump starts tweeting out that we're going to be the 51st state.
Last word to you, John.
Well, I think all of that is true. I think one thing that we need to bear in mind of all this is that what he has promised in imposing these tariffs, which they have to be taken seriously. I don't think they have to be taken literally, these threats. However, he's basically threatening to breach an agreement that a great effort was negotiated with him, and which he described as one of the greatest trade agreements ever written. And he's just going to ignore it and breach it. So it does make you wonder what the point of negotiating with him is when he doesn't mean what he says and he doesn't follow what he's agreed to do. So I think much as it would be painful for us, we have to be prepared with our retaliatory measures, and we have to think of ways that will hurt in the United States. And with great respect, for example, to Danielle Smith and to Scott Moe, that may include putting some export limitations on oil and fertilizer coming from Canada, because we've got to be prepared to make a statement that we can either be in all this together as a North American economy, or not. You can't pick and choose the things you take from us. If you're going to shut down our manufacturing, well, then we're going to make it difficult for you in other ways.
All right. Touche. Very good. A nice way to wrap it up. Thank you both very much for your insights and opinions today. We appreciate it.